Actually, not quite there. Now I'm ready. So I'm going to talk about happiness today. Our topic that we're doing, Linda and I, is about flourishing and thriving, but perhaps another word for what we're talking about is happiness. So as some of you know, Linda and I are deep in the world of marketing, not my first choice, but the US edition is coming out. It's what we need to do. It's what must be done. I kind of think about it like getting a mammogram or doing my PT exercises. So our marketing gal for the US edition told us that happiness is a very popular keyword. And if you use that keyword, you will likely get more sales. So what about happiness? We tend to use other words like flourishing, thriving, joy. And so when she said that, I started to wonder, like, why do I have a hard time with the word happiness? Or even do I have a hard time with that word? Part of it is that life is full of difficulties and people can put on a smiley face and try to look happy both in on their actual face and in their emojis. But there is happiness, hopefully. In fact, if there's no happiness, that's called depression. That's a diagnosis. When you can't feel happiness in the usual things of your life, usual activities. So then thinking out why I sort of have avoided that word, it's sort of like that hallmark version that I'm avoiding, that saccharin form. So saccharin, an alternative to sugar, really doesn't agree with me. My GI system says no. And it's sort of similar. A form of happiness that's more artificial, not authentic, does not agree with me. There really is another kind of happiness, one that's deeper, more sustaining. Maybe we could, if we tie it into the Buddhist teachings, we could say that happiness is absent of the three poisons. When it's absent of you don't feel greed, when you don't feel hatred, when you don't feel ignorance, that leads to happiness. And I could go to different lists in Buddhism, but I won't right now. But Buddhism often speaks to the absence of. I feel like this newish focus in secular Buddhist on thriving and flourishing is really speaking to not the absence of, but what is present. So we were lifting from an article by Seth Segal, who's a spokesman for secular Buddhism about thriving and flourishing. And he has a list of 4 things that are a marker of this. And I feel like these are long sentences that are packed. So I kind of shorten them a bit. So fulfillment, what kind of fulfillment? He says in relationships, accomplishments, and or, not necessarily all of them, aesthetic appreciation and creation. I can relate to that one. I do feel happier when I feel fulfilled in those ways. Number 2, he speaks to forward facing, attentive to the present moment, and living wholeheartedly. That's what I sort of picked up, living wholeheartedly. I like that. Maybe that's actually a sign of happiness when we can live wholeheartedly. And of course, when we live wholeheartedly, it leads to more happiness. And number 3, we focus on this a lot. So of course I'm into this, which is accepting of unavoidable pain and loss. Yes, that is part of happiness, is to accept that, fighting that, numbing from that, doing everything you can to avoid it actually makes it worse. We speak about that quite often. And the 4th one I like quite well. He speaks to personal integration, integrating the values, the central values that inform every aspect of our life. I don't go for the every aspect of our life. Again, I'm a bit allergic to high ideals, but I do like, I do feel happier when my values inform what I'm doing in my life. That does lead to happiness. So Each of us really have to find the happiness that sustains us and is somewhat sustainable, not all the time. The happiness that's not saccharine, but is actually truly nourishing. So circling back, I suppose that's why I'm deep into this work of marketing, which, sort of feels like unavoidable difficulty rather than pain or loss. And I'm doing this because I know that reflective meditation can help people thrive and flourish. It's done it for me, and I've heard many others speak these words, perhaps not those exact words, but in that direction. So I guess I'll call it happiness if this marketing permits others to access our book, to benefit from our work, to find our Sangha, to create new Sanghas that support each other. New Sanghas, old Sanghas that are there for each other through the difficult experiences and rejoice together in each other's happiness. I did a group on last weekend, and something very clearly came out, which is the relief people feel and the intimacy they feel with each other, because they are able to listen, hear each other's difficult experiences, and rejoice together. So I'm going to end this Dharma talk with a quote from our book. I'm doing the We Can Only Hope last look through the book before it gets printed by Amazon, the US edition. And so I came upon this quote. "Let me be clear. This path is not just about old age, sickness, and death. It is also about joy and depth and satisfaction and love and gentleness and curiosity and self-transformation." I feel like reading it a second time. Let me be clear. This path is not just about old age, sickness, and death. It is also about joy and depth and satisfaction and love and gentleness and curiosity and self-transformation. Wow, that was interesting to read that, because I realized that death and depth almost, I had to move my mouth in the same way. I could barely make them into separate words. That's interesting. Okay, let's meditate with whatever comes up. We'll do our usual